Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and seeing an emergency alert unlike anything ever sent before. Not a hurricane warning, not a wildfire evacuation, not even a major earthquake. The Yellowstone supervolcano has begun to erupt. Right now, beneath the mountains, forests, and lakes of Wyoming, one of the largest volcanic systems on Earth is coming back to life. Within hours, millions of people could begin fleeing their homes. Within days, volcanic ash could spread across much of North America. Within months, the effects might reach every continent on Earth. This may sound like science fiction, but Yellowstone has erupted before. Not once, not twice, 3 separate times in Earth's history. Each eruption was among the most powerful natural events our planet has ever witnessed. Scientists agree that Yellowstone will erupt again someday. The only question is when. Today, we are going to follow this disaster step by step, from the first warning signs deep beneath the ground to the global consequences that could follow. What would happen if Yellowstone erupted tomorrow? Number 1. The sleeping giant. To most visitors, Yellowstone appears peaceful. Vast forests cover the landscape. Herds of bison roam across open valleys. Geysers launch boiling water high into the air, while millions of tourists photograph one of America's most beautiful national parks. But beneath this beautiful wilderness lies something extraordinary. Yellowstone sits on top of a gigantic volcanic system known as a supervolcano. Unlike ordinary volcanoes that erupt from a single mountain peak, a supervolcano can release enough material to affect an entire continent. Scientists have discovered evidence of 3 massive Yellowstone eruptions. The most recent occurred roughly 640,000 years ago and left behind a crater so large that most visitors never realize they are standing inside it. This enormous depression, known as a caldera, stretches for dozens of miles across the park. What makes Yellowstone different from ancient extinct volcanoes is that it remains active today. Thousands of geysers, hot springs, and steam vents are all powered by heat rising from deep underground. The volcano is not dead, it is sleeping, and if it ever wakes up, the consequences could be unlike anything humanity has ever experienced. Number 2. The ground begins to move. Weeks or even months before a major eruption, Yellowstone would likely begin sending warning signals. The first sign would not be lava. It would be the ground itself. Scientists constantly monitor Yellowstone using satellites and GPS instruments capable of detecting movements smaller than a few centimeters. If fresh magma began rising toward the surface, the enormous caldera could slowly start swelling upward. Roads might crack. Trails could become distorted. Entire sections of the park would begin rising as pressure builds beneath them. At the same time, Yellowstone's famous geysers might begin behaving strangely. Some could suddenly stop erupting. Others might become more violent than ever before. New steam vents could appear in places where none existed before. For visitors, these changes might seem unusual. For volcanologists, they would be terrifying, because they would suggest that something deep beneath Yellowstone was beginning to move. Number 3. Earthquake swarms. As magma forces its way upward, it must break through solid rock. And when rock breaks, earthquakes follow. Yellowstone already experiences thousands of small earthquakes every year. But before a major eruption, the pattern would change dramatically. Instead of isolated tremors, scientists would begin detecting earthquake swarms, hundreds or even thousands of earthquakes occurring within a relatively small area over a short period of time. Day after day, the ground would continue shaking. Some earthquakes would be barely noticeable. Others could be powerful enough to damage buildings and infrastructure. Every new earthquake would add to public anxiety. News channels would provide constant updates. Social media would explode with speculation. Scientists would work around the clock trying to determine whether the activity represented another temporary episode or the beginning of something far more dangerous. And then they would hear the signal they fear most. Number 4. The final warning. Shortly before an eruption, volcanoes often produce a very unusual type of seismic activity called harmonic tremor. Unlike a normal earthquake, which begins suddenly and then stops, harmonic tremor can continue for hours or even days without interruption. To scientists, it sounds almost like a constant vibration, a deep pulse coming from beneath the earth. This signal is created when magma begins moving through newly opened pathways underground. In simple terms, it is the sound of molten rock rushing toward the surface. For volcanologists, harmonic tremor is one of the clearest warnings that an eruption may be approaching. If Yellowstone began producing strong harmonic tremors, there would be little doubt about what was happening. The sleeping giant would no longer be sleeping. It would be waking up, and for millions of people living nearby, time would be running out. Number 5. America's largest evacuation. By now, government officials would understand that Yellowstone was no longer experiencing routine volcanic activity. The evidence would be overwhelming. Ground deformation, earthquake swarms, harmonic tremors, rising gas emissions. Every warning sign would be pointing in the same direction. Authorities would begin the largest evacuation operation in modern American history. Millions of people across Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho would be told to leave. Highways would immediately fill with traffic. Gas stations would run out of fuel within hours. Grocery stores would be emptied as families rushed to buy food, water, and emergency supplies. Hotels hundreds of miles away would quickly become fully booked. For many people, the situation would still feel unreal. Yellowstone had been quiet for thousands of years. Surely this was another false alarm. But scientists would know better, because the signals coming from beneath the volcano would be growing stronger every day, and eventually there would be no more time left. Number 6, the final minutes. The final moments before the eruption would be unlike anything most people have ever experienced. Earthquakes would become stronger and more frequent. Windows would rattle. Power outages would begin appearing across parts of the region. Emergency services would be overwhelmed by millions of calls. Then something even stranger might happen. A period of relative calm. Many volcanic eruptions are preceded by an eerie silence, as pressure deep underground reaches a critical point. For a brief moment, it can feel as though nature itself is holding its breath. People watching Yellowstone from a safe distance would see enormous columns of steam rising from the ground. New cracks would appear across the landscape. Entire hillsides could collapse as the earth begins tearing itself apart. Beneath the surface, billions of tons of magma would be forcing their way upward. The pressure would become impossible to contain, and then the crust would finally break. Number 7, the eruption begins. When Yellowstone erupts, it will not begin with rivers of lava slowly flowing down a mountainside. It will begin with an explosion so powerful that it would dwarf every volcanic disaster witnessed in recorded human history. The ground above the magma chamber would fracture along massive faults. Within seconds, enormous amounts of superheated gas, ash, rock, and magma would blast into the atmosphere at supersonic speeds. A towering column would rise more than 20 miles into the sky, punching deep into the stratosphere. The eruption could be visible from space. Across North America, people would watch in disbelief as images flooded television screens and social media. What had once been a national park would now be the center of the largest natural disaster of the modern age. But as terrifying as the explosion would be, it would not be the deadliest part of the catastrophe. The worst would arrive only minutes later. Number 8, pyroclastic hell. As the eruption column grows higher and higher, it eventually becomes too heavy to support itself. Parts of it collapse back toward the ground. This is when the real nightmare begins. Gigantic pyroclastic flows would race outward from Yellowstone in every direction. These are not lava flows, they are fast-moving avalanches of superheated gas, ash, and volcanic debris capable of reaching speeds greater than 600 kilometers per hour. Their temperature can exceed 800 degrees Celsius. Nothing can outrun them. Nothing can survive inside them. Forests would instantly ignite. Buildings would collapse under the force of the blast. Entire towns would disappear beneath clouds of burning ash. People caught in the path of a pyroclastic flow would have virtually no chance of escape. Within less than an hour, enormous areas surrounding Yellowstone would be transformed into a lifeless wasteland. The map of the American West would be permanently changed. And yet, even after all of this destruction, the disaster would only be entering its next phase. Number 9, cities vanish. As news helicopters and satellites begin transmitting images from above, the scale of the destruction becomes impossible to comprehend. Entire communities that existed only hours earlier are simply gone. Road networks disappear beneath layers of ash and debris. Forests that stood for centuries are reduced to blackened landscapes. Rivers become clogged with volcanic material. What was once a thriving region filled with towns, ranches, businesses, and national parks now resembles the surface of another planet. Rescue operations become nearly impossible. Many roads no longer exist. Aircraft cannot safely enter the region. Communication systems have collapsed across large areas. For millions watching around the world, this is the moment the true reality of the disaster becomes clear. Yellowstone is no longer a volcanic emergency. It has become a continental catastrophe. Number 10, ash across America. While the regions closest to Yellowstone suffer the immediate effects of the eruption, a new threat begins spreading far beyond the blast zone: volcanic ash. Within the first 24 hours, powerful winds carry enormous quantities of ash eastward across the United States. Cities hundreds of miles away begin experiencing conditions unlike anything in modern history. The sky darkens in the middle of the day. Streetlights switch on at noon. Fine gray particles settle onto roads, vehicles, rooftops, and fields. But volcanic ash is not like the soft ash left behind by a campfire. Under a microscope, each particle resembles a tiny fragment of shattered glass. Every breath becomes dangerous. Every gust of wind sends new clouds into the air. Vehicles begin failing as filters become clogged. Machinery breaks down. Visibility drops to almost nothing in some areas. Within days, much of the country finds itself dealing with a disaster that seems to have no clear end. And the ash is still falling. Number 11. The sky shuts down. Modern civilization depends on something most people rarely think about: air travel. The moment volcanic ash reaches major flight corridors, aviation authorities begin grounding aircraft across enormous sections of North America. Pilots know that volcanic ash can destroy jet engines within minutes. Once the particles enter an engine, they melt and stick to critical components, causing catastrophic failure. Airports begin shutting down one after another. Thousands of flights are cancelled, then tens of thousands. Business travel stops, tourism collapses, cargo shipments are delayed indefinitely. Products that normally arrive within days become unavailable for weeks. For the first time in decades, one of the world's largest transportation networks begins grinding to a halt, and the economic consequences are only beginning. Number 12. The collapse of infrastructure. As ash continues accumulating across large portions of the country, critical infrastructure begins to fail. Power lines become coated with heavy, moisture-filled ash. Transformers short-circuit. Electrical grids start experiencing widespread outages. Communication towers struggle to operate. Internet services become unreliable. Millions of people suddenly find themselves disconnected from the systems they rely on every day. Water treatment facilities face their own crisis. Pumps become clogged. Reservoirs become contaminated. In some areas, clean drinking water becomes difficult to obtain. Hospitals switch to emergency generators. Fuel deliveries slow down. Supply chains begin breaking apart. The eruption itself may have occurred hundreds of miles away, but its effects are now reaching deep into everyday life across the nation. Number 13. The silent killer. For those who survive the initial disaster, a less visible threat begins to emerge. The ash itself. Every breath carries microscopic particles capable of irritating and damaging the lungs. People with asthma, heart disease, or other respiratory conditions become especially vulnerable. Hospitals begin seeing growing numbers of patients suffering from breathing difficulties. Livestock face the same danger. Grazing animals consume contaminated vegetation. Water sources become polluted. Farmers struggle to protect their herds as conditions worsen. What makes volcanic ash so dangerous is that it does not disappear quickly. Long after the eruption ends, it remains on the ground, waiting to be lifted back into the air by the next strong wind. For many communities, the danger continues long after the explosions have stopped. Number 14. Food shortages. As weeks pass, another crisis begins taking shape: agriculture. Large areas of farmland become covered by ash. Crops fail, harvests are reduced or completely lost. Livestock numbers decline as food and water become increasingly scarce. The United States is one of the largest agricultural producers on Earth. Any major disruption affects not only Americans, but also countries that depend on imported food. Prices begin rising. Governments start purchasing emergency reserves. Supermarket shelves empty faster than they can be restocked. Across the world, people who have never even heard of Yellowstone begin feeling the consequences of the eruption. The disaster is no longer regional. It is becoming global. Number 15. Volcanic winter. Months after the eruption, the most far-reaching consequence finally begins to reveal itself. High above Earth, millions of tons of sulfur gases released by the eruption have spread throughout the atmosphere. These gases form tiny particles that reflect sunlight back into space. Gradually, global temperatures begin to fall. Summer becomes cooler. Growing seasons become shorter. Weather patterns become increasingly unpredictable. Scientists call this phenomenon a volcanic winter. History has seen smaller versions before. Even relatively modest eruptions have caused crop failures, food shortages, and unusual weather around the world. A Yellowstone super-eruption could produce effects on an entirely different scale. For the first time, humanity would not simply be fighting a natural disaster, it would be adapting to a changing planet. Number 16. 1 year later. 1 year after the eruption, the world would look very different. Entire regions near Yellowstone would remain largely abandoned. Some towns would never be rebuilt. Recovery efforts would continue around the clock, but the scale of the destruction would be overwhelming. Economic losses would likely reach into the trillions of dollars. Governments would still be managing food supplies, migration challenges, and infrastructure repairs. Yet despite everything, life would continue. Humanity has survived ice ages, pandemics, wars, earthquakes, and volcanic catastrophes before. People would adapt. New communities would emerge. New industries would develop. Scientists would spend decades studying the eruption, trying to understand how such an event unfolded and how future generations might prepare for something similar. The Yellowstone eruption would become one of the defining events of human history.
A reminder that no matter how advanced civilization becomes, the forces shaping our planet remain far larger than anything we can control.
Fortunately, scientists do not believe a Yellowstone super-eruption is imminent. The volcano is monitored constantly, and current data suggests that such an event remains extremely unlikely in the near future. But Yellowstone serves as a powerful reminder of the world beneath our feet.
A world of immense pressure, unimaginable heat, and forces capable of reshaping continents.
For now, the giant sleeps. The question is not whether it will sleep forever. The question is what happens when it finally wakes up.